So I just think it's just so
Yeah.
cool, so important. Do you want some sunscreen over there, Anish? How are you
Yeah,
doing with
there's
your
so
hat?
much sun in my face right now, so I could see it in the camera too.
Edit, cut here. It'll be actually be pretty funny.
Oh, it's so much better. I was like sweating. I was like, oh my God.
I think you and I have a lot in common. I think we both kind of stand for the idea of finding, keeping, and growing your first customers. I know from your experience working at Coca-Cola, doing field sales, your experience working doing digital media and ad sales and flip. Now you're with the Weather Network, sorry, and you've had a lot of experiences around pilot projects, around finding early adopters. And specifically, one of the coolest things that you've said to me in past chats is selling things with no established playbook. So I'm excited to dive into that stuff today. And yeah, maybe let's start there. Tell me, like, selling things with no established playbook, what does that mean to you? And what's perhaps the best example out of the different sales environments you've been in and having to do that? What does that actually mean to you?
Yeah, so great question. I think for me, when it comes to figuring out, I mean, you keep going to different businesses all the time. You keep hearing about different problems and different tech solutions to those problems. And then when you work at a company, especially in the tech side of things, you get to a point where you realize, hey, you know what, we're onto something special here. We think we have this technology that can solve this problem either in a better way or solving a net new problem, or there's always this unprecedented piece. And the moment you get to that unprecedented piece, you realize there is no benchmarks for success. You don't know how long it's going to take. You don't even know if you're going to solve the problem on the first go.
Yeah.
So for me, it's when you have more unknowns than knowns, and that's when you're like, okay, there's no playbook for this. We're sort of learning and iterating as we go. I had a few of those occasions come up during my time at Flip for sure. And for those that don't know about Flip, Flip's main mantra is to transform digital shopping for from the print flyer to the digital flyer. So when I was working there, we were going to these tier one enterprise retailers and pitching them on technologies that had never been in market before. So that was definitely where I got a big taste of pioneering initiatives, and that's a fun word that we use to label that unknown piece, pioneering, right? Everybody's pioneering something. Um, so that's definitely where I got a lot of my experience in that unknown playbook world for sure.
That's fascinating. And I guess they probably didn't teach that in MBA school. Hey, like the actual, like what it's actually like when you're out there doing something where it's like, like you said, there are more unknowns than knowns. You're figuring things out from scratch. That's always been my favorite part, where kind of the sky's the limit. You walk in, it's a new environment. So in like, have you noticed anything? So when you're finding in building these programs from scratch, you're a sales guy, I'm a sales guy. How are you able to identify who you should be talking to and who you shouldn't? Because I've wasted so much time, man, talking to customers that like would never be the first one. They might be like the 500th one, but I can't really start with them. So how are you identifying who is worth your time to go and do these pioneering sales with?
So in the role, then this is the perspective of the salesperson, right? And if you want to do the pioneering thing properly, um, you need to have a really good understanding of what your product is, what its limitations are, what its capabilities are. You're typically not, if you're the first salesperson in the company type of thing, or you're the first person running an account. Either way, you need to have an idea of what problem is it supposed to solve. If you don't even know what problem it's intended to solve, you're shooting yourself in the foot before you reach out. Because the first thing someone's going to ask you is, "What is this going to do for me?" So step one for the salesperson is to really figure out what does the product solve? What is the intended solve? And the key word there is intended, because you might figure out that your product can do 50 different things when you're actually in there. But step one is really understanding what is the intended outcome of this product. From there, you can sort of reverse engineer who it is you need to speak with. So if you're helping a CFO deal with their financials, then you're dealing with with that type of team. If you're helping a marketer amplify their message, great. You have to deal with marketing and brand teams. I mean, the list goes on. But first step is I always talk to my product folks. I always spoke to my senior leadership team to figure out what is it that we do and why is this product here.
I love that. So in this conversation, Aneesh, I think that we can do something pretty cool. I think we could basically build some kind of framework, right? And I want to identify the gap that's kind of between finding that first customer and doing a pilot project with them, because I think we can really chat about the importance of pilot projects here. And then after the pilot project, building some kind of case study, some kind of story that you can then use to sell the next customer. So I identify this gap as between the first customer and the second customer for any particular type of product or program. So I'd love to dive into the weeds of that. You already talked a little bit about finding that early adopter. When you're finding that early adopter and you are now in that conversation and you know they're interested in, if you know that you want them to do a pilot project, are you telling them that in advance, or how is that dialogue, you think, for you? Speaking from the perspective of the entrepreneur or the leader in an early stage company that's growing, should you be forward with the customer and be like, hey, we're looking for people for pilots, or does it depend on how that conversation goes? How do you structure the actual dialogue?
Yeah, so right up front, I'm telling them the truth. I feel that the truth. I can't believe I can't remember who said. Oh, it was Marcus Chan last week. He said it's always the right time to do the right thing. Right, like that is the worst thing you can do as an entrepreneur is lie to someone or mislead them or make it seem like you have the cure to whatever, and then they realize that you're just a liar. You wasted time and resources, and then your reputation's done. Right. So you need to be upfront about the problem you're trying to solve, the number of attempts that you try to take on. I've had conversations with customers where I've straight up told them, you will be the first to market with this tech, right?
Yeah.
And that's a piece that you need to be really upfront with, and it all comes down to storytelling. Like that is a huge, whether you're working for a tier one Fortune 100 that's introducing new products, or you're an entrepreneur for a three people startup in your mother's basement. You really need to figure out, you really need to, it all comes down to how you story tell that new product. So
Yeah.
that's definitely something I'd say right up front. You have to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say that if you tell an early adopter that they are an early adopter and that's why you are talking to them and that you want them to be the first for something, like more often than not, that's not a negative thing. And sometimes that's actually a plus, right? So it depends on the profile. I think that's why you need to message for the right type of customer at the right time, because there's a lot of customers that will be scared shitless if you say that, they're number one and you don't have all the data to back up what you're doing. There's another customer that's like, man, I want to be first to do this. I want to have that reputation. I want to solve
Right.
a problem and get a competitive advantage. So that makes total sense to me. In my experience doing this, we just didn't know that we wanted to do a pilot project right off the bat. So we built that relationship. We figured out who they were. And then we had the benefit of being like, are they the right ones for the pilot project? Because that's my question to you is,
Right.
actually choosing the right one after you know them, after you get to see them. Are there customers that are bad for the pilot project or
Oh yeah.
customers that are better?
Oh my goodness, yes. And we live in a world where I'm really glad you brought this up, because we live in a world where everyone is consumed by, I call it the Netflix mentality, right? Everybody wants that next episode right now, right now, right now. We're in that binge mentality. We take that same, I was watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, and
Yeah.
everyone loved The Last Dance and hated it because they had to wait a week before the next episode came out, right? So we have this big need to just get everything now, 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 now. And sometimes we take that same level of personal thinking and apply it to our business where we need results right away. So you can't get desperate to be like the first person that says yes to talk to you is going to be your pilot partner. You have to think about the long game here. You're really trying to build a business, build a proper case study to build something that's scalable. You have to put in the due diligence to make sure that the market fit is correct, that the product fit is correct. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought this up, because you cannot sacrifice the right execution for the current execution, right? Like that makes no sense.
Yeah, I love it, Anish. Well, hey, we're building the playbook right now, so that sounds phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, like I guess it's kind of, maybe this isn't the best thing, but it's kind of the reality is that you have a limited amount of time and you need to execute something, and you find someone that
Hmm.
might be a good, early adopter or good for the pilot project, and then somebody better comes along, right? That happens. So I think you need to be a little bit selfish from the perspective of who is the best to do this thing with, because both sides are investing extra resources. You are investing extra, they are investing extra. And if you do the pilot project with, I think, the wrong person or not the most ideal person, then you're not going to get the best results, right? They're not going to give you as much feedback that you're going to use to improve the product and the marketing message. The
Right.
project probably won't be as successful in the first place because of some lack of diligence or communication. And they might not be, from a credibility perspective, the best one to be like the shining star to show and trigger the rest of the market to follow suit. So I feel like, from my experience, it's all right to have that first conversation. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be upfront and be like, "Hey, we're doing a pilot project. This is what we want from you." But I think I would also argue for the alternative, which is just have that first conversation first, and then you can see how soon you want to do what with them and propose that. I guess it's a bit more customized.
Yeah. There's actually three areas that I look at when I'm trying to find a partner, right? So the first one is executive alignment. Do we have someone who's senior, who has the authority to give resources, money, and all that? But there's another component there when you're looking at executive alignment. Do the values line up, right? Sometimes when you have a product, sometimes when you have a different strategy to go to market with, you need to find people who are comfortable with the fact that this is a pioneering initiative. That things can go wrong, and this is a learning piece for everybody. Usually the trade-off is I'm ready to put in risk for this not to work out, but the return is that I want to be the first to market with this new technology because it's going to help me in the long run. So that's usually the executive alignment you need. The second piece is they might love to be that person from a risk propensity standpoint, but do they have the money and the technology to actually to enable this on their own end, right? Like what are the dev resources or technical resources that the customer needs to enable my tech within them. This could be applicable to software, tech, hardware. I mean, the list goes on. There's a lot of places you can take that in any way you want. It doesn't have to be a technical thing. There needs to be an implementation capability. So those are the things that I look for right away. And then the third piece is this is if you have the gift of time and you're not getting desperate at the end of your slack. Uh, does this customer have a scalable option as well? So
Hmm.
if we kill it with this pilot or we kill it with this customer or this proof of concept, can this customer bring this on to multiple departments or multiple teams or whatever it is? Can this customer become like one of my best customers? Now that's a nice to have. It's not a must have. I think the first 2 points are the must haves.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. And I would propose the question, actually, Anish, that is it better to have one customer for a pilot project or multiple? And I know the answer is it depends, but I want your thoughts of how you could work through that, because I feel if you have one, you have the risk that it might not turn out the way you want it. It might only be
Right.
for one particular ICP, one particular ideal customer profile, and it might not address the problems of other types of customers. And I feel
Hmm.
that if you do multiple, you get more feedback, you can round it out. You're also spreading more resources more thinly. How would you think about that?
Yeah. The first thing you need to understand is what are your restraints? Like, do you have enough team power? Do you have enough? If you're selling hardware, software, do you have enough of the product built out and it's ready to go to that number of people? Once you figure out how much tech or how much product you have to work with, you do understand what your limitation and restraints are. So I think that's the first step. Is like, what do I have to work with? What do I have to actually go to market with? Do I have enough do I have only one team member who's working part time on this, and then they can only give me 5 hours a week? Five
Yeah.
hours a week means maybe two active conversations. So it's always good to be building excitement and getting people, like as a salesperson, like you always want to keep that pipeline full. In this case, you're building a pipeline for people who might be pilot or entry level partners. Um, you always want those dialogues going, whether you're the CEO, head of sales, whatever. But when it comes to actual live conversations, you need to be able to know that I can only have one or two conversations at a time to do this properly. If you end up realizing that you're having a lot of attention coming in for your pilot, then you really need to reassess. Now you have the gift of like too many people, and now you get to be selective. It is not always like that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They're the opposite, right? They have few people. They're actually like, desperate for time. Like it's a grind. It's a hustle. But the first piece is really understanding their resources first.
Yeah, I would agree. I quoted you as saying, without pilots, this whole industry is dead. Now, I can't remember
I agree.
exactly. Yeah, so you're a huge proponent of pilot projects. Do you want to elaborate a little bit of that on that, Aneesh? Do you feel that like in some situations in B2B environments, when you're starting from scratch, zilch, and you don't have the data, that like pilot projects is really the make or break for lots of companies, or how strongly do you believe?
Yeah, if you ask any good salesperson, they'll tell you that the key to any sale is you've got current state, which is garbage for the customer. You've got ideal state, which is where they need to be, and your product or service is what connects the two.
Hmm.
So, in order for you to get sales, to create that, to create that economic boost, that jobs, the only reason companies are able to blow up and get big is because they've been able to prove to enough people that their product or service takes them from a crappy state to an ideal state. And if you don't have the pilot or project to kickstart that story, you have nothing to sell. There is nothing to sell. So I'm blown away by I've heard the other side of this argument where people are like, well, no, pilots aren't as important. I'm like, in what world? Everything we do, whether it's sales or not, has there's a barrier to entry or a risk propensity for everything. We look at reviews when we buy things on Amazon. We look at whatever, when you're looking at buying anything, you always looking at some sort of endorsement. That's the exact same thing on a B2B level. Where you need to have a pilot, a success story, a proof case that people can relate to and resonate with. So pilots are the key to the whole thing. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind either. And in order to do these pilots, it seems like, you're giving something up, right? Usually you're not making quite as much money, you're
Right.
discounting, you're something. I want to ask you, how important is it to charge something and not just
hmm
nothing? Because you feel like in pilot projects, some companies have such a difficult time finding one that they're willing to give it away for free. But I think you and I are probably on the same page that if you give it away for free, there's drawbacks. I want to hear how
Yeah.
you balance, how you price it.
So always, always, always try to get something from the customer on this. It can be the bare minimum cost. You can even position it, hey, we're going to give you the tech for free, but I have to cover the cost of the engineer or the dev who's going to code all your stuff. And usually that triggers a higher degree of interest, and it also puts some skin in the game for them where they care about the results. I've seen many times when you just give away tests and you give away programs, they're like, the results are in, and they're like, that's nice. That return on ad spend would have been cool, but like great. But when they're invested, they have a different psychological approach to it. So that's ideal state. Eventually, as a startup, you do need to get a proof of concept. You might be hitting the end of your resources. I would never give away anything for free. So if you are going to give away a no money or that version of free pilot, make sure you set the expectation. Hey, like, look, we're okay not charging you, but we need a public case study that speaks to these results. And
Yeah.
a lot of companies do the white paper stuff where you can anonymize results, but like it's so much more powerful to be like, we did this pilot with Coca-Cola and it was phenomenal. And when you have that brand equity behind it, that's usually a fair trade from what I've seen in the past.
Yeah. And do you think that these trades should be negotiated, like actually on paper, like whether it's a contract or whether it's just an email, like something in writing is my thoughts, because there's a lot of situations where you spend like 6 months on a go-to-market strategy and it
Right.
relies on you just not getting something for one project, for one product, for one client. You need to have some story that you can tell, and the better you can tell it, the better. Like I see these projects and pilots are always an exchange of values. You do this for me and I'll do that for you. At the end of the day, like we can put our heart and emotion into it, but it has to be, and it's not just monetary, right? There's values for both sides. The press, like doing a collaborative press story that makes both parties look good and innovative, is usually beneficial for both if you're working with a true early adopter. So I'm wondering, do you think that there should be like contract stipulations that say things like, we're going to get a public case study with your brand name as long as you're satisfied, but even to go further than that and kind of list these things out, or where would you draw the line?
Yeah, I'm a big believer of a lot of people talk in emotion. A lot of people talk when there's oh yeah, we'd love to do this, no problem. Like it's doable. Get
Yeah.
as much in writing as you can, especially when it comes to the covenants of the contract. Like the key parts of the negotiation that have been done verbally, I always follow up with emails. I always confirm, like, hey, just to confirm, this is what we all talked about. We're going to give you X in return for Y. I'm a big proponent of covering that, and it keeps everyone on the same page. Sometimes I'll story tell saying, hey, we just want to make sure you're taken care of. So here's everything that we're going to do for you. Right. And I
Yeah.
put the emphasis on like what we're putting in. And obviously the return part needs to be included there as well. But once it's all in writing, it makes me a lot more comfortable that, hey, this is legit. They've looked it over. Multiple people on their teams have probably signed off on this. Normally, if you're selling to a decent sized company, they've got procurement, legal, and multiple eyes. It's not just one set of people looking at it. So
Yeah.
you may not have all those departments, but the people you're selling to probably do.
Yeah, I like that. I've done some pilot projects. In my experience, you've done them in more of a larger enterprise environment than I have. So you've applied
Right.
a lot of the same startup scrappy principles, but in different size companies. So I'm enjoying this chat because it gives me a chance to validate what the hell I've been doing, and and just to make sure, like, am I on the right track? So hey, that's part of the benefit of First Customer Club podcast. Luc is learning here in real time. So
Hey,
uh,
you know what? Anything I do to help, and I love hearing from the folks that are doing it in the smaller settings, because it also, there's an entrepreneurial grit that just it's invigorating, right? When you have nothing, when you have everything to lose as a smaller company, I think that goes a long way for sure.
I would agree with that completely. And to add to your point about what we are putting in writing, I have put in a stipulation where it's basically, if this doesn't produce the result, if whatever happens financially, we're going to make sure you don't lose anything on the project. Have you done something like that before, where you have a certain expectation of, certain equipment, software performing a certain way, and you kind of put a caveat in there, just, you're still wanting to charge them, you're discounting but charging something, but if it doesn't work out the way it should, that you kind of say, you're not going to lose any money. We will cover you from losses. Thoughts about the risk aversion clauses?
Yeah, so I mean that's like a last resort clause in the negotiation. Really
Yeah.
depends who you're talking to, right? Like I would never lead with that.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair game if you're heavily discounting. You've set the expectations that this is a risk, right? The storytelling piece that goes with it is, if successful, you will get to be the first to market with this, or your savings are going to go through the roof, or you're going to get more customers, whatever your benefit is. Uh, I think the trade off is usually the discount or something of that nature. So yeah, I would really caution against that consignment type of call out. But if
Yeah.
you're dealing with expert negotiators, they'll likely add that in. You just need to be prepared to take that on if you know what your resources and constraints are.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. It really seems like there's not a one size fits all for how you set up a pilot project, how you reach out to early adopters for it. Like there's some
Hmm.
fundamental principles, But at the end of the day, you're working with things like supply and demand. You're working with things like the natural constraints or resource requirements of your product, right? If your product needs to have some API integration because it's software, people are going to need to do things, right? There's not like a zero cost to hand it out. There's an
Right.
actual, cost of implementation, whereas sometimes there isn't one, or sometimes it's more of a fixed or variable cost. So I guess it varies. When I'm doing this kind of stuff, I'm always trying to reverse engineer what I want from the end of this. Maybe it's like, hey, fast forward 6 months, we want to go and raise a funding round from investors for our startup.
Right.
And just thinking like, A, thinking logically, and B, also from asking investors, like, what do you want to see? And the investor will be like, oh, we want to see that you have customers that are willing to pay, and that we want to see that you have this type of traction, and that you clearly know the market, and all these other things, which I won't elaborate here. But you understand those particulars, and then you reverse engineer and say, okay, so I'm going to need to have a few pilot projects, and I can't do them for free because that's not going to be the right signal, right? That's not going to be the traction statement. So we need to be able to prove that they're willing to pay, that we solve this problem, that we hit this KPI. So like in terms of KPIs, setting up the pilot, pre-pilot, what would you say needs to go into that in terms of, you know, developing that formula of here's what we're actually going to do. We're not just giving you something for 3 months and pissing off. Like there's requirements, there's things, there's KPIs, right?
Yeah, and this is where I see a lot of people failing. So it's not even getting the first conversation. It's not finding the people with alignment. It all comes down to how you measure success. So first thing you need to do is, if you are not the expert on insights, analytics, and stats, you need to get someone on your team who does understand how to prove results with statistical significance. That is something that will always run its course through, especially if you're selling to a bigger company, an enterprise type of org. They usually have teams that are just built for, they're called test and learn, TNI, measurement, insights teams, analytics teams. It really depends what type of company you're talking to. You need to talk to those folks. So if you're a salesperson going to a category buyer, or someone in marketing, or someone in, maybe you're selling to a salesperson, um, you really need to make sure that someone who either connects to the CFO at some point, or is the department responsible for proving results and measuring. You need to be talking to them. Um, those folks have the KPIs, like we need this much return on X, but they also know about, like, every single major company or every single like established company has been sold to before. You are very likely not the first person to pitch a pilot to somebody from an established company, right? Now, if you're selling to another startup, different story. But I always like to ask, okay, so you adopted this technology in a different department. Um, how did you measure them, and how did they become your go-to product for that? Or maybe if you're selling against an incumbent, same thing. How did you make the decision to take the people we're competing with? Like, what was proven to you for that to happen? And once you prompt out these questions, they come out with a specific saying, well, here's the pain point they solved, here's how they demonstrated it. Great. Now you have a roadmap to actually work off of. Now you're building roadmap off of their roadmap versus not having one on your own. So you just need to ask those types of questions where you get into their decision making framework, but you need to make sure you're asking the right folks. Like, that's key. A lot of people just talk to the first person they call, and it's like, oh, I think we got more sales. I think so. You have to talk to the right folks who actually know what those measurement and analytics are.
Yeah. This sounds off topic, but I think it is on topic. A lot of people say the customer is always right. Just to ask you point blank, do you believe this, or what's your thought about it? Because for me, I'll state it while you catch some H20 there. I understand what that means in principle, but I have to, in general, disagree, because I think if you take it too literally, you're doing just as much harm as you are good, because customers are customers because they don't know something and they need you to provide some benefit, some value. So I think customers need to be coached. Just because they think something or they want to work a certain way doesn't mean it's right. And if you let them do it the way they want and the project ends up screwing up and not producing the result, they're not going to remember that they tried to override your opinion. They're not going to remember that they forgot to put in the work, the effort, the hustle. They're not going to remember they didn't answer your questions. So you need to hound your customers, I think, put them in their place and be a bit of a hard ass to get the best end result that's better for everybody. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, I agree with you that customers definitely need more education on things than, especially when it comes to new pioneering things, right? The customer doesn't know what they don't know, but I've legit had someone, because I was selling into retail, and when I worked at Coca-Cola, I was selling into the restaurants and the food service side. Um, I legit had multiple customers tell me in the past that, Anish, I've been doing this job longer than you've been alive, right? Like I've been given that feedback before. So so when you have to go in, there's three roles that you play as a salesperson, right? You're the doctor when shit's not going well. The customer's in pain. They're coming to you for a solve, right? That's like the customer service side of you. The second piece is you're a guide. So when you're educating this customer on new ways to approach an existing problem, or telling them about a new problem that they didn't even know about, you're being a guide. You're like that educator, right? And then the third piece is you're a bit of a, I hate using this term because it's like it's very male focused, but like you're a quarterback, you're a project lead. So your role here is to take the needs of the customer and then architect and execute on a solution that makes sense for that customer. So you're always doing one of these three things. And if you're not doing one of those three things, you're not doing any service to the customer at all. Now, you're absolutely right. The customer isn't always right. Actually, most of the time they're wrong. They realize it, and that's why they call you. They're like, Anish, I don't know what I'm doing here. Can you help? I want to pick your brain on it. This is their way of asking for help.
Right.
But in
Yeah.
order to get there, in order to get to that level of trust with them, have to be, you have to work on your approach on how you build that that consultative placement in their Rolodex. So that's the place where a lot of people struggle.
Yeah, I guess that's why I like providing advisory services like in the past, paid or free to startups as opposed to mid-market or large enterprise. Because if you just tell a startup like, hey, you guys are screwing the pooch here, you're doing this wrong, they'll listen to you. You can't say that in a lot of other environments, right? You need to be a bit more stealth, I suppose. But I like how you said that. They'll ask you for an opinion. They want to bounce something off of you. It's really them saying they need help. So I guess being strategic with the language there. But yeah, I just think that we need to like make sure that these projects are done in the best way possible. And they don't always, they meaning the client, the customer, the early adopter, they don't always just put forward a team of people and are like, here's the finance person you can talk to. Here's the operations person you could talk to.
No.
Like you need to dance and, sing the right songs in order to get in front of these people. And I think you need to be a little bit pushy. You need to be stealthy, but you need to be pushy.
Yeah, and the framework I've been following since day one is it's called light, consistent pressure. So
Mm,
I use the same mentality when I'm trying to get from that conversation stage to pilot phase, or even getting that first meeting, right?
yeah.
You can't annoy the shit out of people, but you need to be able to stay top of mind, especially so when they've taken you on as a pilot partner and that piece is done and now you're in execution mode. So light, consistent pressure is a huge fundamental I follow across the board in my sales experience. Not even like it's one of the most important things.
It's probably good in any kind of relationship too, right? Personal relationship, friends, family, everything. So I think a lot of these things are very transferable too. We're
Yeah,
talking, I think today we're talking a lot about B2B, business to business, pilot projects, first customer, but a lot of it's applicable even to B2C. So I think we can generalize, but I know we're focused mostly on B2B today, right?
right.
Yeah. You mentioned the word partner, and I kind of want to build off that, Anish. The importance of mindset I'd like to touch on. So, like in terms of like a transactional deal versus a transformational deal, in terms
Hmm.
of feeling like you're just doing something because you're trying to, add another zero onto the end of a paycheck and meet your sales quotas, versus to do something that takes that future state and current state and just knocks that out of the park. How important is that in the sales process? And what needs to be done to make sure that both sides, the salesperson and the client, are both in line with that expectation? Because it seems easier said than done. I have a feeling that it's difficult to actually get that alignment. It's difficult to find the right salesperson that wants to execute transformationally and not transactionally. And not all
Right.
clients care. So, what would you think about that?
Are you still looking at this from the pilot sense and that lens, or are we just saying in general?
You can generalize it if you want. I'm thinking from the perspective you found a good early adopter, you're still kind of
Hmm.
nursing that relationship, whether or not you're doing the pilot project or not, in terms of getting something to them, whether it's for a limited time or they're buying it outright. Just want to know, like, do you communicate fundamentally differently because you're looking for something more transformational than transactional, because you're looking at them as more of a partner and not just a client vendor relationship, or is there a difference?
Definitely is. For me, I feel a partner. You have to be the partner first, right? That's a lot of times people make it like, okay, well, we gave them all this free tech and like they're giving us money, but like it's so much bigger than that. So I've been a big believer in that we're human beings first, and then employees at whatever company second, right? Like that's been the flow. And when you start treating the other person on the that you're talking to or selling to or whatever as a human being, you automatically think start listing for things like what motivates them. So it's not that this person wants to just kill it for their department. Actually, deep down, this person wants to kill it for their department because they're up for promotion,
Right.
right? So now you have to think at that level where what is the personal motivator for this person? I've sold to people who truly they're like, I don't even want to be the VP of marketing. I just want to crush my competition. They're so competitive, right? And I'm like, okay, got it. This is a competitive person, and they're like, I know, like, Anish, I know I will never be the VP of marketing here, or it's going to take a while, but like, I really need to see retailer X not do better than me because that impacts my bonus. Now I'm like, okay, so this is not about career progression. This is about money, but and not our like P and L. This is about your bonus and performance. Okay, got it. So once you understand the human elements of what people are going for, it's a lot easier for you to help them out. So I'll give you an example. Um, Once you figure out what that human trigger is, you can then do things that go above and beyond. And this is when you go from vendor to partner. So above and beyond, and this is a must do for me for any customer I work with. I start sending them information and research and expertise on things that have nothing to do with my product.
Hmm.
It has nothing to do with me. I'll start doing research as if I'm an employee at that company. I always think if I were to quit my job right now and work on customer X's team, what is something that I know based off my conversations that is keeping her or him up at night? And then it's like, hey, by the way, did you know that there's this other thing that has nothing to do with branding, but it is a marketing issue, for example? It has nothing to do with me. You can take it on. And then they're like, holy shit, thanks, Anish. We had no idea. We actually did not know this. Thank you so much. Now they know you're in it for them because you have nothing to gain. So, how many times do salespeople put in activity where they it's like, I get nothing out of this transactionally,
Yeah.
right? Like that, this happens it's not common. It is not a common thing. Most of the salespeople will be like, well, I'm not going to spend time researching on something that has nothing to do with my product because I don't see dollars for that. And
Right.
that's a short game. That's a short game. It's common, and that's why so many salespeople are just seen as transactional relationship holders. But if you want to actually manage an effective relationship, you need to start owning the business in a relentless way. Um, and I do that for all my tier ones across the board. They know, and then eventually they're like, I I have a marketing problem. So I sell to a lot of marketers. Clearly, all my examples are marketing focused now. But I want it to be that it is irresponsible for them not to call me when they have a marketing problem. That's the end game I want to take it to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. If we're going to look at it from the perspective of a startup company and they're trying to hire their first partner in a sales
Hmm.
role, their
Hmm.
first VP of sales, director of business development, what regardless of what the title is, they need help with sales.
Hmm.
And they're trying to find the right person. And if they don't find the right person, they're going to have many different problems, including what you just mentioned. They're going to have someone that's going to see that they're having a difficult time generating the short-term sales, generating those short-term returns, and it'll be a huge cultural loss for the company. What would be your advice to a startup out there that is maybe tech focused, product focused, not really customer focused, that needs to find somebody that does have those pieces of the puzzle? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what are those pieces of the puzzle? How should a startup behave to attract somebody awesome like you? Or as a second tier, maybe me?
No, no, you're doing amazing stuff. So I honestly think that so there's a stat going around that VPs of sales will only be around for like 18 months at a given time for a company, um, and it always has to do with that alignment. Promises are made up front.
Yeah.
VPs of sales come in and say, "Oh, I'll grow your sales by this much, no problem." And there's always that expectation. You just feel like when you buy something at the store and you're like, "Oh, this is not what why did I pay for this?"
Yeah.
Right? That's what the owners go through. But before you even get to that stage, you really want to bring in someone. I think the most underrated skill set. Yes, you need to have technical knowledge. You need to have go to market experience. You need to have like actual relationship management experience. You need to know how to prospect. Those are all technical skills. Go nuts. You need that. Those are the basics. But beyond that, if you want to find a good VP of sales, the most underrated sales quality, in my opinion, is the ability to project manage.
Hmm.
There are so many talkers out there. There are so many good talkers they've got the boardroom presence. They can make the jokes. They can connect the dots, and they can tell stories. But when it comes to delivering results, especially at an early stage startup, you need to have salespeople who are ready to do the less sexy stuff, who are ready to put on different hats, who are ready to talk to people who aren't at their, who are, if I'm used to selling at VPs, now I'm talking to managers. You need to have people who are ready to play all roles. And for a lot of people, it's an ego thing. They're like, I've been in
Yeah.
sales for 15 years, right? So getting that project management and like that soft skill element, I think that's the biggest thing that you need to find in your VP of sales.
Yeah. Are you calling project management a soft skill? Like, how would you define that? Because it seems like project management could be
Mm,
both. There are some
yeah,
components of project management that seem like soft skills, but project management is also a degree you can get in university. Like, thoughts about that?
yeah, no, it's a great call out. So there is a technical element to project management. You need to have you need to have the desire, though. There's an element of it where you want to stay organized with the deal. You understand it's not just the volume of phone calls you're making. You have a quality control quality control desire, especially at the entry, like the small startup type of environment. You
Yeah.
need to have someone who's not just good at cold calling and volume and getting sales or getting leads and all that. You have to have someone who has the gumption to drive strong quality execution. And if that person doesn't have that skill set as a VP of sales, eventually, you'll have a department for customer success and people who can do that for you. But at the beginning, you need to have someone who understands that piece of the equation as well. And there is a technical follow through with that for sure. But the technical follow through won't even get there if the person in the interview is not talking about quality delivery. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, I agree. And this, I feel, loops almost back to the idea of a transformational sale versus a transactional sale. Like, I think it's a
Mhm.
similar mindset where you're just doing whatever needs to be done to build that solid foundation of the business. I'm just reminded of when I I would say had an opportunity, but I would say seized an opportunity to go and spend time with my last customer. I signed up to be a customer champion. So it was actually beyond pilot project. It was customer champion,
Right.
but same mentality. And I remember celebrating my 29th birthday with that customer champion in Austin, Texas, out at a
Wow.
restaurant with the customer champion, with his wife, with his mother, with his stepfather, and
Oh,
they got me
wow.
a birthday gift. And I stayed a number of nights at their house while I was meeting with not only them, but other customer champions. Like the relationship that we have and had both, they're still a good friend. We're on text message terms. Like, I think that's so important. That's my style. Not everybody is going to necessarily do something on that
Right.
level. But for me, that provided such an edge, really, because this customer champion would tell me things that I wouldn't otherwise know. This customer champion would, you know,
Right.
would spend this extra time and effort and energy with me where I would be able to hear things, know things. They would introduce me to people, to places. And you don't get that value if you think transactionally as opposed to transformationally.
No, I agree. And that sounds amazing, by the way. I love the customers who end up becoming, more friends than anything else. I'm glad you had that experience with that customer.
Yeah, it was honestly like that. Moments like that are some of my best moments in entrepreneurship, hands down. Is those
Right.
moments where like the learning that takes place, but the relationship that's built. And that's a competitive advantage because I come back and I provide information to our engineering team about what product changes we need to make, about what changes in the messaging. I have a new Rolodex of contacts, and I just have a new perspective that I would not understand if all we did is have that 1 hour, let's call it a boardroom style, Zoom style meeting. So within that
Right.
story is a few different messages, one of which is there's nothing better than in-person meetings. Like I don't think anything replaces in person, but I also believe that you need to have as intimate of a conversation as possible. For me, I could do in person, so I did it. And then the other part is like, don't just consider them a partner, but like try to consider them a friend. That's my personal philosophy. Like, does that match up with you?
100%. I miss the in-person meetings more than anything right now. I think that's where I'm the most effective because you have a forum to talk about stuff that's not always work related,
Yeah.
right? You can understand what people like outside of work. Again, it goes back to that we're human beings first and employees second, right? So you understand the human piece a bit more. Um, and it's not like it's like a premeditated game, like, oh, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna learn, okay, this person likes this, this, and this, and I'm gonna use that later. Like some salespeople can be very diabolical that way. I think good salespeople have like a very genuine, uh, just a genuine connection with other people, right? They enjoy meeting other people naturally.
Yeah.
It's not a forced thing. People can, Josh Brown calls it commission breath. If you try too hard, or it seems like you're really just trying to stack the deck a certain way in a conversation, people aren't stupid, right? Like they're gonna know there's something else going on here. So I think that genuine need to want to get to know people in a personal setting, it does help to sale. Like people will only buy from people they like. Period. It's very rare for someone to be like, I hate your living guts, but here's $1 million. Like it's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the end game for anybody, I call it the phone test. Whenever my boss asks me like, what is your relationship like with this customer? Um, if for me, I have like it's such a feelings based question. How do you measure that? But for me, it's like if I can text or pick up the phone and call this person and know that they'll pick up or call me back, I have a good relationship with this person,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That's sort of like my gut check. Like, do they pass my phone test?
Yeah, I would agree. And are they pissed off when they do get that call or text from you, or are they like
Yeah,
happy to pick it up? And is the first few minutes of you guys just shooting the shit? Because it's so much more fun and pleasurable as a salesperson, as an entrepreneurial thinker, to have those kinds of relationships. Um, Yeah, it's to have that kind of rapport, and you gain an edge that you just otherwise wouldn't. So I just think it's just so
Yeah.
cool, so important. Do you want some sunscreen over there, Anish? How are you
Yeah,
doing
there's
in
so much sun in my face right now. I gotta get the blinds. One sec. I'm just it's like in my face. I could see it in the camera too. Oh, it's so much better because it was like I was like sweating. I was like, oh my god, it's an
Holy smokes.
interrogation.
Yeah,
I know.
I was gonna try to Amazon Prime a hat or some sunscreen over to you or something there. So I'm glad to see you back in HD there. I want to
Yeah,
chat for a few more minutes, Anish, about kind of after the pilot project. We're now at the case study. Some people don't like the word case study, and again, it makes it seem very, very transactional. But let's call it what it is for simplicity's sake: the story, the case study, the story from the trenches, whatever it might be. Do you see a very tight correlation between the pilot project and the case study? Because again, I mentioned it earlier in this chat. I kind of see it from a reverse engineering perspective. And as you're thinking about what you want the pilot project to be, what the KPIs you want to hit, I'm also thinking ahead and I'm like, what do I want to put on paper? What do I want to make a video about? What do I want that story to be on that section of the website? What am I going to put in the press release to like, to the bloggers out there to get us talking, get our public relations sky high? So do you see a direct correlation? Do you also feel just as sure about the need for case studies as you feel for pilots?
yeah. I mean, I feel like the case studies is what the pilots are supposed to unlock, right? So the pilots happen, and then the case study is the story you're allowed to share and tell. So
Hmm.
my whole thing is you need a credible story in order to scale and see growth for a company, right?
Yeah.
So they are very much correlated or linked to one another. To answer your first question, um, I think the part where I've seen a lot of people mess up case studies is they really just focus on the result. We save this much time or we grew this much sales, which is important. But you always want to go back to the basics a bit. I think for any case study, whether you're a pilot or established company trying to create, a better story or narrative, you kind of want to ask your customers in that case study period what you're pretty much doing like a post campaign interview, right?
Yeah.
Especially for a pilot. And the question is not so much, hey, we hit the KPI, great. Can I just put that on paper? No, let's get the story out. So I always ask questions like, what prompted you to sign up for this pilot? Like, and that usually unlocks what the pain point was, right? And once you get that, you're hearing it from the customer's lens of what that old current state was with their language. And chances are, once you get their language, you're able to apply that to your positioning strategy when you're talking to the next prospect. So understanding what triggered or prompted that decision is very important. So the second piece is, what did we actually do for you? Like, did we solve the problem? And this is a leading question. You will not ask that if you fail the pilot. Okay, just know you ask that question like, yes, you did solve the problem, and here's what you did. And that piece is also, because that tells the next person the journey that this customer felt, right? And then I always ask, like, the results piece is pretty straightforward. You know what the results are. The other piece I always ask, how would you describe us to other people in your company who we've never interacted with?
Hmm.
That piece is the game changer, because now you are talking to your ICP, you're talking to your persona, and you are understanding how they label, what language they use to describe you. And that also reinforces your copy, your own language, your scalability. If you're speaking the language, you don't need a Rosetta Stone anymore. You have it right there. So people always forget these important questions when they're writing the case study. They just focus on that end result number, but you can build a case study to really be like, here's, like, with the language of the customer, here's where the problem was. This was their journey. This is how they describe us to their own department. And here are the amazing numbers that we have to back up whatever result. So that makes your case study a lot more powerful.
Wow. Yeah, totally. I'm feeling the power right through the voice over IP or whatever we're using here. That's phenomenal. Yeah, that hits me in two different ways. The first one is it seems like a starting point to focus on the problem. Seems like it's absolutely essential. Like you need to go further than that. But
Hmm.
I feel like it all starts by setting up that problem, like having the list of here's the things that, that here's their process, here's their current state. And in their own words, what are the problems with that current state? And that kind of
Right.
sets up the flow for the solution. Because I think the solution is easier once you've figured out what the problem is. Because the problem usually points to the solution. If you're an entrepreneurial thinker, you're like, oh, geez, well, you do this one small task and you do it backwards. So let's do it forwards, right? It's usually pretty
Right.
straightforward. And the other thing that I have triggering in my mind is it seems like a good salesperson generally has an ability to be a pretty good copywriter. Would you agree with that?
Ooh, I think it finally happened. We're gonna have to disagree on that one.
Okay,
So,
let's do it.
so, so, what I'm seeing now, especially, so I started posting content on LinkedIn quite frequently over I think I'm on month 2 now. And I've gotten to meet a lot of folks who are experienced salespeople. They would tell you they are good salespeople, and on paper, yeah, they probably are. They're hitting 70 to 80% of their quota. They're excellent relationship builders, like you said. But when it comes to communicating through writing, whether it's social selling or emails, there are multi-million dollar industries that upgrade salespeople for this. Like I'm talking lots of money here. So there's clearly a pain point for how people communicate over email. You're going to go on LinkedIn, you'll see 50 different perspectives on this, on how to write good emails, how to write good copy.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I will tell you, I joined this. I'm the head of community at this sales and marketing group called Rev Genius, and we have 1,500 members now.
Yeah,
And
it's
this is
insane. We're going to talk
oh
about that in a few minutes, by the way. I
oh
want to make
perfect.
sure we talk Rev Genius.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I'm glad. I'd love to talk about Rev Genius, but we sent out a survey to our members, and the number one thing that sales folks need help with was copywriting, storytelling, like that type of thing. That's in the top. I think it's in the top 3, right? So we have like storytelling, copyright, prospecting, all that. But it all comes down, how do I write better? And I think it's a huge problem that a lot of salespeople are realizing, especially during COVID. They're not commuting anymore. They're typing a lot more, right? And they realize that, holy shit, I am bad at this. So I've seen more experienced sales folks say, I need to upgrade my copywriting skills now than I ever have before.
But do you think that so let's argue about it. Let's debate it.
Let's do it.
Do you think that they're not good at, do you think that salespeople are not good at copywriting because there's some innate thing about a salesperson that makes them a bad copywriter? Or do you think it's more the fact that like good copywriting is difficult and it's more important now than it ever was before, and it's kind of perhaps something that a lot of salesperson traditionally don't do a lot of, so it's a new skill that they're learning? Because my assumption would be that some salespeople, not all, but the ones that are customer focused, very customer centric in
Mhm.
terms of how they go through discovery, how they understand the customer's need, how they perfect, how they ask questions, how they take the customer's words and they use that to fuel better conversations, better copyright, informing the marketing department. I would think that that type of salesperson that we're kind of focusing this conversation around has the ability to be a really good copywriter if they had the right amount of practice, because they're already thinking about what the customer says, behaves, acts,
Right.
and they are literally writing down or using tools to record their notes. And then they just need to slap that down on paper empathetically. What do you think?
I feel like you're describing a very small group of sales folks. So when the question comes up, are salespeople good copywriters? I'd argue
Right.
that very few are doing what you just said. And I spoke to someone at Rev Genius about this. She's actually coming out with a tech very similar to Grammarly that will help salespeople better improve their emails.
Wow.
Um, there's a whole thing here called the U to I ratio, right? The number of times salespeople say you versus I is actually quite low. In fact, it's the opposite. A lot of people in sales will say, we can do this, I can do this, our performance is this. They feature dump, whatever. They very rarely talk about the you. So what you talked about just now is not as common as one would hope. Um,
Right.
and that's the piece in the debate where I'm like, I think there's more awareness towards this now, but have people practiced the way you said, hey, if you practice well, you can become good at copywriting. You can make it personalized. I think the personalized buzzword gets thrown around all day, right? But how many people are actually using that personalization in an effective way to get responses? And then the be all end all here is email response rates are still all time low. So
Yeah.
if people are sorry, yeah, they're actually lower than they were pre-COVID. So if we are getting better as an industry, as copywriters, those responses should be getting higher. So, so that's sort of like I'm looking at the numbers at a bird's eye view, and I'm like, yeah, I think people practice a lot, but I don't know. I haven't seen the responses get better, not yet. Hopefully, this changes.
It seems like an opportunity, right? It seems like an opportunity because for the right kind of salesperson that cares about the right kind of things, why wouldn't you be? So that's
Yeah, yeah.
that's pretty cool. In terms of the case study, in terms of the language, do you have any final bits of advice on how to do that? I just want to emphasize that it really seems like the language is important, which is on point with what we're discussing right now, to the point where it seems like if you want to be telling a compelling story from the perspective of what happened to the customer, but through the lens of who's going to be reading it that can relate to that particular customer also, right? So
Right.
it seems like you don't want to be telling somebody within your case study that, hey, like, you have this problem, but at the same time, if you lay it out and you can visually help the person in your ideal customer profile that's reading the case study to put themselves in the place of the person in the story, and you can articulate the problem, and not just, not just how expensive it was, how inefficient, but you communicate the emotion of what it was like to be in that spot. I feel like that's probably the most effective way to do it. But I'd love to know what you think. How does that thought line up with yours? What have you seen work?
Yeah, honestly, it goes into what we were talking about before. I think once you get the language down, it does come to storytelling, and that is ironically enough copywriting in itself when you're doing it in written form. Um, so you have to make sure that once you get the interview questions down, right? Like we talked about that before, right? You interview properly at the end. You do a post-campaign interview, and you talk to every stakeholder that you worked with, and you ask those questions. What prompted you to sign up? What did you feel about the results? Um, and then you're asking those questions about what would you do with this after the fact. Like you're asking about what problems are you solving across the board, right? So once you get that language and once you get that information down, you need to build a story around it. So that's like the phase two, right? That you have all this information, you're building that case study. The phase two is really coming down with, we have the language, we have the pain points, we have the end result. Does that pain point transfer across industry, like for the rest of everybody, or was it
Mm,
just this company that dealt with that, right? And this is where this is where you really need to apply that knowledge to. If you helped an HR company reduce the amount of application screen, let's say that's your tech,
yeah,
is that a pain point? Is that a pain point that other HR recruiters go through? Absolutely, it is. HR companies get three to 500 applicants each, and you go to LinkedIn right now and look at how many. There's someone screening through all of those applications. So
yeah,
when someone tells you that this is a pain point that prompted us to take this meeting or take this pilot, you need to make sure that that problem that you're storytelling around is universal within that industry that you're selling to. That's like a huge tip right there. Like a lot of people will just say, "Oh, the customer said it. This must be gold," but you need to put some thought into: is this a real problem for everybody? And
yeah,
you won't know that when you're doing a pilot. It is the first time you're going into the mix. Um, so as long as the customer is saying, "Hey, the end thing that we're solving for, solve that inherent that first problem that we had," great. you're onto something good there.
Yeah, I also think this is why it's good to talk to more than one customer, right? Even if you're only doing
Absolutely.
one pilot project with one case study, your resource constraint, talk to 5, talk to 10, so that you make sure that you're choosing the right ones. So you make sure that the problems that you would solve if you help them are in line with others who collectively all seem to be in your ICP. And therefore, you have a better chance of getting the right kind of results at the end of it.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
agree with you 100%.
Tell me what's happening with Rev Genius. I am getting connection requests all the time. I joined the Slack group. It's like the biggest thing that happened overnight, right in the midst of COVID. And I understand that you
Oh,
were the community manager for it. Or tell me your involvement and what you guys did and what you're building.
yeah. Honestly, Rev Genius has been incredible. I've never met so many people that just want to help others, like without anything in return. We talk about that transactional versus transformative thinking. 99% of the members in that, and we call it our alt work family. It's it's insane to me to see the support that the community has for everybody. It's nuts. Um, I was like member number 80 in that range, 80, 90. It started June 2nd. We had 50 people migrate from a massive LinkedIn group chat to Slack. So that was like really day one of this becoming something real. And I don't even know what the date is. It's what, July 15th now?
Exactly.
So a month and a half later, 6 weeks, this is week 6 for Rev Genius. We're at almost, I don't even know, 17, 1800 members. Um, and it's blown up because of that secret sauce that we have. It really comes down to the people wanting to help other people. So whether you're a salesperson, a marketing person, or a rev ops person, we have a lot of people in those 3 revenue generating functions, hence the name Rev Genius. Um, they're supporting each other, right? They're practicing, they're asking questions, they're sharing their best practices across the board, which is massive. That knowledge sharing happening in real time is so powerful. And it's from all levels. You could be a VP of sales for 20 plus years. You could be starting up your own sales team in a very small early stage startup, or everyone in between. And there is definitely a place for everyone there. So my role is to make sure the communications and engagement still happens, right? When people just don't show up, it's not just Slack in a noisy place. It's very noisy right now. We've got over 30 channels and we have an 80-85% active user rate, which is insane. But people are asking questions. There's 3 main reasons people join Rev Genius. One is they they want to get better at their skill, their vocation. They want to upgrade their technical skill set. The second piece is networking. I want to improve the number of people I know and quality level relationships. And the third piece is they want friendship. I
Yeah.
COVID's been a lonely thing for a lot of people. You've eliminated the social circles for a lot of folks, and a lot of people needed something like Rev Genius to find like-minded individuals to talk to. So now we have things like, we're coming out with the Rev Genius cookbook, Rev Genius yoga classes, Rev Genius. We have a whole gamers for Rev Genius Slack channel now. So people can just talk about video games because they like to do that for fun. Like, we are really respecting that part of it too. So I'm really excited to see what happens next. We've got some amazing programs coming down the pipe. A lot of volunteers helping out. Like, it's a really fun place to be right now, for sure.
I'm going to throw an idea into the pot. How about some
Yeah.
Rev Genius online personal romantic relationship matchmaking? If
We're
if
gonna
if
do the
if we're
digital Tinder.
lonely, if we're lonely corporately, we're going to be lonely personally too, right? Let's Tinderfy this over here.
Let's talk about that in phase 3. Right now, we're going from phase 1 to phase 2, and then if it's still a need from the members, we'll find a way to make it happen.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I'm seeing so much value out of LinkedIn beyond just transactional, beyond selling something, getting a job. And I know a lot of people just sign into networks like LinkedIn, like networks like Slack, these tools, and they skip past a lot of the groups because they just see it as a
Right.
place to slap their resume. And they're posting just because they want to get a job, and they're connecting and writing a connection note that suggests they only want to make the sale. There's so much more going on with that. And it's really nice to hear that the Rev Genius community is much more focused on big picture learning, transformational stuff. And it'll be exciting to see how many members this community has in like 6 more months.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm interested to see where we go in 6 weeks.
Yeah,
And 6 months from now, I don't even, I can't even imagine what that's going to look like if we keep going at this rate. But yeah, I'm really excited. We've got a great leadership team that I love working with, and I I get 50 to 60 messages on Slack directly a day with ideas, feedback, the constant communication from the Red Genius members is it's overwhelming at times for sure, but it's also one of the most encouraging things that I get to see on a daily basis. There's so many different perspectives that are happening in there. Everything from diversity, equity and inclusion, mental health and wellness, women in leadership, like all these very important areas of our lives right now. It's all convoluting to one place. So
yeah,
I'm hoping to bring in a little bit more method to the madness right now. But overall, it's been a lot of fun.
that's awesome. So to kind of wrap up this fun podcast, Aneesh, I want to ask, did we miss anything, any soapbox that you want to mention or talk about, something that's important to you that's kind of in between that gap of finding the first customer and finding the second customer? Did we cover the spectrum well enough for today, or is there something else there?
Yeah, I tell everyone put your egos to bed, ask for help.
Yeah.
A lot of the times people think they have to do everything on their own. There's a lot of folks like, and I'm not trying to plug Rev Genius here, like that's where I've seen it a lot. But go to any online community, talk about your what you're working on. There are people who can help refine your craft. I've seen a lot of salespeople who do their first real presentation with the customer, which is the biggest mistake you can make. You need to find folks that you can practice in front of, and that's a huge, huge, huge piece that you want to you like. I can't practice my sales pitches with just like my fiance or in the mirror or anything like that. Like she's
Yeah.
gonna be like, "Wow, babe, you sound great," right? She because it sounds intelligent or I'm a storyteller or whatever. But you need to talk to people who understand the ups and downs of sales, who can take on the role of a persona, objection handle, throw curveballs at your way. You need to have that practice. And that's the piece where a lot of sales folks, they don't like to get that vulnerable in front of other sales folks. They don't like to show weakness.
Yeah.
Or sorry, they perceive it as weakness. When the truth is you need to get vulnerable to really level up your skill set. So that's definitely an area I'd close off with today is, if you really put in the practice, you will get a lot better in those real conversations that you're looking to win at.
You'll be a better salesperson. You'll be a better entrepreneur, I would argue. And I would argue
Yeah,
even further, you might get better copywriting skills too.
a little bit, right? You need someone to tell you that you're writing. I've had so many people tell me, Anish, why did you write this? So I'm learning every day as well. So I couldn't
Yep.
agree more.
Yep. Last question I want to ask you in about a 30-second kind of context. We've talked about it, but I always like to ask, what would be your advice to an entrepreneur out there? How do you find your first customer? What would you say?
Oh, great question. After you identify the intended product, there's always a guessing thing you're going to do as a first time seller, like which customer, which industry, all that fun stuff. Once you've identified the industry, you need to go onto platforms like LinkedIn or Twitter or where you can find out what these people are talking about, and you need to engage in those conversations before you even start selling them. You can like people's posts, you can follow people what they're what they're browsing for, get a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account, pull up titles from these industries, identify those companies, find out what they're talking about once you get those companies. Find out what the individual people in those companies are talking about. What's the language they're talking about? What are they following? What are they liking online? Then you get a sense of the language and the sphere that you're playing in. So that's what I'd say would be step one. Really understand the macro level factors that impact your industry.
Yeah, could not have said that any better. And there's many more steps to follow, but you got to start with number one, right? Start with the first
Yeah.
step, start with the first customer. Aneesh, if people love what they're hearing and they want to check you out, where's the best place to follow you? Do you have any particular plugs. You can't plug Rev Genius again. I gotta put like a sound barrier on that, but I am going to link to Rev Genius as a good community that is growing insanely. If people want to connect with you on a different type of level, where do they find you?
Honestly, LinkedIn's the best for me. I always make out time weekly to talk to new people as well to help them out. So that time is getting less and less every week, but definitely connect with me on LinkedIn and happy to help where I can.